All right. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Lessons in Loss, Love, and Resilience. I'm Arik Housley, and I'm with a friend that I've known since I was probably 6 years old. She looks just like her mother, by the way, who was my Cub Scout leader. So, Julie, thanks for joining me. Most people know my story of losing Elena in a mass shooting. You're on here because you've had some loss in your life as well. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your grief journey?
Yes, I'm Julie Gebhardt. A lot of you may know me as Julie Chapman or grown up with both of us. Um, but yes, I lost my husband to cancer, fast and furious cancer 6 years ago. He was healthier than all of us and ended up with lung cancer. Came on quick. And we were left kind of spinning and trying to figure out what to do with the little time we had left. It was quite the journey to try to figure out what to do next, where I still had kids at home. I had a mother-in-law living with us who was also on a cancer journey. Though she had survived hers for many years, she had a bad heart and she would end up having to do chemo every, say, year to just kind of keep up with it. So at the same time, they were both going through chemo treatments and was trying my darndest to stay afloat with kids at home and my oldest getting ready to go off to the military. We kind of kept everything a secret from him just because we knew he was going off to basic training and that was going to be in San Antonio. And it was scary thinking that we were sending him off and it might be the last time he saw his dad. But we also knew that if we didn't let him go, he would end up at home, possibly thinking he needed to take care of me, take care of the family. So we kept it a secret until it was time for us to go and see him at graduation. And it was difficult. I took my mom and my dad, and of course, my youngest, and left my mother in law at home with my sister in law. And we basically showed up and said, "Congratulations, son. And by the way, dad's dying." So it was a huge shocker. I think the hardest part of this journey is knowing that my kids have grown up a lot quicker than most kids have had to. That
Yeah.
was definitely tough, but the bonds that is created for us has been pretty incredible too. So in that journey, have had multiple loss. My mother-in-law passed 2 weeks before my husband. And then within about a year and a half later, my stepson also passed tragically. So it's been rough. It's been a really rough journey to get to the other side, a lot of rebirth. And I don't think I've really even grieved my mother-in-law fully or even my stepson just because
Mhm.
of the weight of my husband's death. It left a gaping hole. So I was a stay-at-home mom,
Mhm.
and and we had a business, and that was something I had to learn quick too. When you're walking through a fog and trying to figure out life without your significant other, the love of your life, the soulmate that you've been with for 27 years, to try to learn new tasks to keep a business running or even just stand on your own 2 feet is
Mhm.
very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And it was Bob's cancer. And I asked this not because of out of judgment, but a friend of mine passed of lung cancer and she had never smoked. It was this a really unique fibroid one. Was his due to smoke or to work, like what he did as a
It
job, or
could
was
be
it?
both, truthfully. I mean, not anything recently in the last 22 years, but, when we first met, he did smoke, and he quit very shortly after. I think it was just before we got married, in 1999. But he also worked in the factories and whatnot before Cal OSHA was a big deal. So there was probably a lot of pollutants that he inhaled, and we talked about that and what could that look like, and just trying to bring awareness to where he spent time and earned
Yeah.
a paycheck. But with the little time that we had left, and how quickly he was declining,
Hmm.
it wasn't something we explored. It was more important to just be in the moment and get through the day to day. So,
Right.
no,
Right.
it
For
didn't.
sure.
Yeah, but I mean, exercised every day, ran every day, ate healthier than all of us. His
Yeah.
statement was, "I need to be healthy for you guys, to take care of you guys." And, I mean, even when we started having babies, he's like, "I'm putting the Harley away and we're gonna do, boats and trailers instead of Harley. When we retire and the kids are grown, we'll ride that Harley again." So,
Yeah.
I mean, he was always thinking of everybody else and taking care of us. So, no, he wasn't a smoker. He tried to do everything right. So
Right.
happens, it just happens.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why interesting for me too. That's why I was asking that was, a lot of people's assumptions are, oh, lung cancer
Hmm.
equals
Yeah.
smoker. And that's why
Yeah.
our friend Tracy, same thing. And she had it for quite a few years. She had a really unique lung cancer. And, the assumption immediately for people is that. And it's like never once, right?
Hmm.
And whether it doesn't matter whether he was or wasn't, it's more of there's just these automatic perceptions of
Yeah.
similar to a friend who was on my podcast before who has lived with HIV for 20 years. And she said, obviously in the beginning, everybody's like, well, you're a homosexual male because that's who has this disease. And that
Right.
was, so it's really the perceptions that people get out of it. So so your stepson was Bob's from previous, but then you have two kids of your own
I
or,
do.
or okay.
24-year-old and a almost 21 next week.
So the 24-year-old was the one that was going off to boot
Mhm.
camp.
Yep,
Okay. I
he's
didn't know if that was your stepson. I was
17.
trying to,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, no, my stepson was
Okay.
41 when he passed. Yes,
Okay.
and our oldest together, Gunner, he was 17 when he left,
Okay.
and 18 while he was in basic training. So, yeah, it was hard, really hard. And my
Yeah.
youngest was 14 at losing dad.
Yeah. Well, that was, yeah. So Alex was 14 when Elena was killed.
Yeah.
And again, similar to what you said, is was forced to grow up faster. Did you have, so I always tell the story about we woke Alex up that morning at about 6 a.m. and said, hey, we got to go. There's been an accident.
Mm.
And he asked, is Elena okay? And I said, I don't think so. And we pretty much knew, but we hadn't been informed officially. So we were on our way down there. And about 2 weeks later, he turns to me and he goes, Dad, you told me it was an accident. This wasn't an accident. And that's when I really realized, like, I need to be honest with him. So I asked that because Gunnar, and have you ever spoken to him after about how was he upset? Like, because a lot of people ask me about how to talk to their children, about
Right.
what to say, so I'm asking as your
Right.
experience, how did that?
I think once we actually had that opening conversation when he looked at the wheelchair, because Bob was so weak at that point, and he literally lost his long, curly, luscious locks while we were in San Antonio. We had to go buy a razor at the BX to shave his head, and we made a thing out of it and videoed it and tried to laugh about it and all that. Gunnar didn't want to be there. I think it was too raw for him at that moment. But the second that we gave him the news, I feel like the doors opened. There was no more secrets. There was no more taking the phone calls that as a mother of a military child, you walk around with your phone while they're in basic training because you never know when you're going to get a call. You don't know when they're allowed to. So I would carry it around. We'd get a phone call and we'd all like hover around the countertop in the kitchen with my phone on speaker. And Bob would be the first to talk because he couldn't talk very long. If he did, he'd start cough. So he'd quickly like, hey, bud, how are you? How's things going? Okay, I'm going to let you talk to somebody else. And he'd hustle his buns into the other room so that he could cough for a while and get it all out. So keeping Gunnar standing, my oldest son, keeping him standing, and then getting there and telling him that news was heartbreaking. But I do have to say that everything that followed afterward has been so raw, so transparent, so open, even to a point where I will never forget this. As a parent, you always want to hear that you're doing a good job, right? But to hear it from a child that you know is struggling equally as much as you are, he was off at, I don't know if he was in Germany or if he was at his tech school, but he said to me, he goes, Mom, I don't know how you're doing it. I'm so proud of you. And oh my gosh, the tears that brought on was just,
Yeah.
but it's odd because I feel like even though we're still mother and child, because of that growth, because of, I mean, let's face it, loss breeds beautiful things, right? If you're looking,
Mhm.
if you're looking, if you don't sink yourself into that hole and don't continually try to dig yourself out, you're going to be stuck there. But if you're constantly trying to help yourself or help those around you, and especially as a parent, you have no choice. At least I didn't.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I know technically you do have a choice. And my youngest therapist even checked in on me right after Bob's passing. She said, how are you doing? I said, well, this is what it looks like. I said, and here's what I'm doing. And she said, Julie, I am shocked at how well you're doing. I said, I don't have
Mhm.
a choice. And she goes, but you do. And that's why I'm in business. And it was kind
Yeah.
of an eye opener to me to realize that
Hmm.
we do have a choice in this grief journey,
Right.
right? We can choose to see the beauty and the darkness of everything that surrounds us while we're trying to rebirth who we thought we were with, our house full of children that are no longer there, the husband that's no longer there. All of it is such a journey in reconfiguring who you are at your core. Every piece of yourself is something different now. And
Right.
I think with him in particular, we've always been very close and it's always been really easy to talk open with him. And I've always been with both my kids. It's always been an open journey. A little more difficult with my youngest because my youngest was definitely a dad kid. But this too has been a journey for the two of us to become closer. Never thought that we'd
Hmm.
be as close as we are. And it's been an incredible thing too. So much
Yeah.
beauty in the darkness. Do I miss him every day? Do I wish he was still here? Percent, 1,000%.
Yeah, of
I
course.
wish he could walk through that door and see the growth that, man, the team that we would be now would be something incredible. Like it would
Yeah.
be really, I daydream about that. What would that look like now? But
Yeah.
it can't be, it's just day to day sometimes. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
minute by minute. And sometimes, especially at the beginning, it's second by second. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can't breathe at all. It's finding the
Yeah.
grace, right? The grace
Yeah.
of just when you can't get up off the couch, don't sit on the
Yeah.
couch for a day.
Yeah.
He's fine the next day after I sit on the couch and I wallow and have my pity party the next day. I'm so much better for it. I've got the energy again. I can move again
Yeah.
and breathe again.
You gave yourself the grace to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, and I usually keep religiosity out of it, but is there, like, are you, people of faith? Do you have that? And if so, how has that been on that journey? And if not, how has that been on that journey? Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely, 100%. Uh, I think it's hard not to have spiritual awakening when you've had great loss. I think that
Agreed.
we raised our kids in Methodist church, very lovely church, very open church to all people. And that was our belief was that God loves all people. Bob was raised in a church in small town Ohio. I not so much, even though there was still prayers and blessings and thankfulness to the Lord above and all of that. I never quite felt super comfortable sitting in a pew, but I always said my prayers. We said prayers with the kids at bedtime, said prayers at the dinner table, took grandma to church, because she lived with us. We're involved as much as we could be at church, just with time constraints and busy lifestyles and all of that. But for me, it never felt like I was meant to be sitting there in a pew. And Bob and I had a
Hmm.
conversation about it. And he goes, I don't always believe that sitting in a pew is church. You can be sitting on the top of a mountain and it's church. So while we both had faith, his was more devout than mine. And for me, my spiritual journey has opened up in the sense of dreams. The dreams that I've had have been incredible visitation stuff. More in the spirituality journey of there is so much more than just God. Doesn't mean I don't believe in him, but there is so much more than just God. So when I say my prayers at night, it's, thank you, God. Thank you, universe. Thank you, angels. Thank you, guides. Thank you, light workers. Thank you all for surrounding me with your love and support and guiding me through this journey because there's so much more than what we see. So for me,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Yes, my journey
Well,
is my
I love it. So
journey.
yeah, no, I love it. And similar for me, like I've always struggled with, very similar to what you're saying for
For
my
sure.
journey. Hannah's was born and raised, she's Filipino descent. So born and raised in the Catholic Church, affiliates with that and feels comfortable in that scenario. I've always been fine. Like I can go to Christian church, Catholic,
Mhm.
wherever. And
Right.
to me, we can watch it on TV. Like for me, it's every day, if that makes sense, and how we carry ourselves and how we carry ourselves with others. Like all of that is part of that relationship. And in this scenario, for me too, it was just such an awakening. And so, yeah, for me, it's less about the religion per se and
Yeah.
more about the journey. And
Yeah.
so I heard you saying things. So dreams, I've had a couple too, but I want to hear, or if you're open to tell me either like
Yeah.
a dream or a story, or like for me, it's in my book about lots of like signs that happened that
Mhm.
just were mind blowing, that somebody could be a skeptic And even a
Yeah.
very good friend of mine who just recently lost his father, who is a skeptic and an atheist, has told me he's had signs that's happened. And it just makes me go like, look, again, this doesn't mean that you have to believe in
Yeah.
Christianity. This just means that there's a lot we don't know, and let's just have a respectful conversation around it, right?
Right.
So what would you be open to tell us like a story? Yeah,
Sure.
love it.
Sure. So I have a friend who's very connected to the other world, and she helped a lot with trying to help Bob's body feel really well, or as good as it could towards the end. And she's a massage therapist and all that as well. So she was deeply connected to him because she had literally hands on him for a while before he passed. And she had told me, I remember right after he passed, we were chatting, she was checking in, and she said, Julie, you know, you're going to have to say goodbye to him again. And I was so mad at her. I was like, are you kidding me, Lynette? Like, I didn't say anything to her about being so angry, but I was like, I already said goodbye to him. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my lifetime, I'm sure. I'm not saying goodbye to him again. I didn't understand what it meant, but at the beginning, I had visitation dreams from him. They were very real. The very first one I had, a very short one, was, and I don't know if it's a dream or if it's actually reality, truthfully. I
Mm-hmm.
was laying in bed, I was asleep, and woke up to a hand on my hip. I was on my side, and I felt the mattress kind of cave, and I kind of came to, and then it just went away. It was gone. And then fast forward to probably a year and a half later, and I kept thinking about what Lynette had said about that he's going to say goodbye again. He's got things to do. He's got his own journey. He's got schooling to happen. And you know how much Bob loved to learn. He's got to go do his thing. I'm like, "He'll always be with me." He always said he was going to be with me. He said, just ask and I'll be there. And every single time I asked, he was there. Bob, I need your help with this. Show me what I need to do. He'd show me his numbers. He had specific numbers. But this one particular dream that I had, I was sitting in a room, like a ballroom of some sort, convention room, but it was a wedding. And there was round tables, like the round talk tables. People were sitting around them. I was sitting in my chair, kind of turned out from the table, and he came walking into the room, and he was in his sweatpants and in his workout wear. I could see his tattoos. His hair was pulled back, just like he would be walking through the house at any other given time. And he came and he kneeled down in front of me, and he put his hands on my legs, and I touched his arms like they were real. I could see the tattoos. I could feel his skin. And he tipped his head to the side. And I can't remember if he said anything to me, but I knew he was saying goodbye. And in that moment, I woke up sobbing, hysterically sobbing. And I looked at my watch, and it was 6:06 in the morning, and it was the
Mm-hmm.
16th of the month. 6:06
Mm-hmm.
was his number, and the
Mm-hmm.
16th was the day that he died.
Mm-hmm.
So, and from that moment on, I no longer had visitation. There was no more visitation. It's just dreams with him and them now.
Yeah.
It's a very different feeling when the
Mm-hmm.
visitation dreams are gone, opposed to something that's just in your subconscious. Very
Yeah.
different. But the
Yeah.
numbers are always there. They're
Yeah.
always there. And it's very creepy but comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
It's funny. I was watching an interview and it was Matt Damon, and he talked about he remembers waking up feeling the embrace of his father and how real it was.
yeah.
And that's when I realized I had had a similar scenario where because I used to work early in the morning, sometimes Elena would come in and she'd kind of like half lay on top of me from the side of the bed just to give me a hug, goodnight type of a thing. And so I remember the feeling of her body, like pressure on my shoulder, like, cause I would sleep on my side, and she'd come and she'd be like, "Good night, Daddy." And she'd lay on top of me. And I remember the feeling of it. And similarly, I woke up just in tears because I was like, it was so real. And so frequently I tell people that are not believers or that don't believe in this kind of stuff, I go like, look, whether you believe it or not, if that makes someone in this grief journey remember or feel or emote someone that they loved, it's just feeling that love in that moment. So you don't have to believe me. I don't care if you believe me or not. The difference is I know what happened. And if nothing else, I look at it and go, it still gave me that sense of joy and love and heartache and sorrow and all of it in one. I love those moments. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. So now it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
How have your how have the boys, like, so is your oldest still in the military? Is your
Yes.
youngest in doing college? Is he doing, trade school? Is he working? How are they doing? Like, so it sounds like you've grown in your relationship with them,
Oh,
but
yes.
how are they
Yes.
doing in their journey?
They are doing very well, very well. My oldest actually happens to be home right now. He just came back from 2 years in South Korea. So he is getting ready to head off to his next duty station, luckily in the States. I won't say where it's at because I'm not supposed to, but he will be close by. At least I can take a plane ride now that won't be, several hours and some severe jet lag.
Yeah.
But it has been very difficult because he has been overseas for 6 years. And
Yeah.
that's made my journey a little sadder as well to have him
Yeah.
gone, especially to go from a house of five to a house of two in less than 6 months.
Right.
Quiet. My youngest, there's a whole story in that I'm sure would be helpful to tell at some point, but
Hmm.
he's not ready to tell it. And I honor and respect that journey for him.
Absolutely.
But in the midst of these 6 years, we did find out this kiddo has ADHD and autism. So that has been a journey all on its own and trying to figure out what that looks like. So while I used to be the helicopter mom that, lived on the right side of the county line to go to all the right schools and all the things and work in the classrooms and hover over my children and make sure they got great grades and all the things. It no longer looked like that for us. And I had to accept that that's what it was going to look like. I mean, this kid
Hmm.
went into ninth grade knowing that dad was dying and went into ninth grade as an honor student and literally came out failing all but two classes. Dad had died, COVID hit, all things kind of crashed. Grandma died, and that kiddo and grandma were super close. Literally, when I birthed that baby, I came home and plopped that baby in her arms, and she had over 430 foster kids in her lifetime. She was my second set of hands when Bob was working or whatever. So they were
Yeah.
very, very close, and it's been hard because this kid has suffered a lot of loss, more than
Right.
I think even the oldest. So
Yeah. Well,
it's
and I ask you that, Julie, because I think a lot of times when I talk to people on a grief journey, I think that many of them assume like, okay, well, one's doing okay, so they should both be doing okay. Like we're doing the same thing. We
Mhm.
all do this different, right? I mean,
No.
even when I explained about Alex, Hannah, and myself with losing Elena, like we each did it different and we're in the same
Mhm.
household, right?
Yep.
So I think I appreciate you being honest with that because as much as it's less about that and it's more about him and he's having to grieve the loss of his father and his grandmother. And then you look at the things like your grades and those things don't become priorities anymore. Like
Mm-mm. Nope.
there's frustration, there's sadness, there's anxiety, there's all of these emotions that come and it's how you get through it. And the assumption that it'd just, like it'll just work itself out. Or I appreciate you being honest about that because it's just hard. Like the whole thing is just hard and there's no perfect way to do this, right?
No, no, and I will say the first couple years before we ended up with the ADHD and autism spectrum diagnosis, I was on suicide watch for 2 years, and that was
You
tough.
were.
That was really tough. I got a phone call one Sunday. I was still deep in my grief, and it was from I got a text and a phone call from two different parents that said, "Hey, I'm terrified for your kiddo. Please know that we just heard this from our kiddos." And I collapsed. I was like, Bob, Ellen, whoever is up there watching, I cannot do this. You have to make
Hmm.
sure this is
Hmm.
okay, that we come out of this okay. And it was tough. It was tough for the first 2 years. I wasn't sure if I walked through the door and went and said, "Hey, are you okay?" If, see him just laying there. It was scary.
Hmm.
It was really scary. Kept all my pills locked up, anything's locked up. Everything was always locked everywhere. And then with my oldest, it was different in the sense where we've talked openly where I'm fearful for what comes for him later. He has been so disconnected from how to grieve here at home where he grew up and left. And it's worried me in the context that he hasn't processed it quite because he hasn't had to be deep rooted in the grief of where we've been at. So
Hmm.
I worry about when he ends up getting married and has children of his own, how is that going to feel? Knowing that he's now in his father's position, watching his children
Hmm.
grow with a father and how much his father is going missed out on, you know. But we have talked openly about that. And I said, you know, at any time you need to know that there are resources. Find somebody to talk to. If it's not me, find somebody to talk to because you can't do this on your own. I
Right.
literally just stopped therapy this last year and I was doing it right before after Bob got sick. And there was something big that happened with my youngest. And I was trying to my darndest to get a doctor's appointment and I could not get one. 6 different doctors kept saying no. Bob was sick. We knew it was bad. Didn't know exactly what it was. My mother in law, like I said, was getting ready to go through cancer treatment again. And I was so tapped out, like way
Hmm.
beyond the eyeball height. It was
Hmm.
sky high. And I remember getting off the phone and having my first anxiety attack in probably 30 years. I had that fight or flight feeling like I just wanted to run down the street and just run away from everything. I ended up going back to my bathroom, hands on my knees, not running down my face, all being barely able to catch my breath. And I went, oh no, I'm not doing this. I can't do this by myself. There's no
Hmm.
way in hell I can do this by myself. And it doesn't matter that my parents live next door, were willing to pick up slack. It was what was going on internally for me, right? Like nobody can control that but me. So the very next day, I called around and found a therapist. And she is the one that kept me off meds. She's the one that talked me down. And
Yeah.
I literally got to a point where I was like, you know what? I think I'm okay now. Like 6
Yeah.
years later, I think I'm okay now. But
Yeah.
it was necessary to have somebody to try to figure out what my life looked like
Yeah.
because there was so many layers of loss and it wasn't just the death part. Oh,
Right.
there's so many more layers of loss in that. Your life looks
Right.
very different.
Right. And your what you thought your life would look like 20 years from now
Huh.
isn't even, that's kind of out the
Yeah.
window at that point. And
Yeah.
it's when you say that too, it's one of those things that we talk about a lot for here. So Hannah still goes to therapy. I mean, it's been over 7 years for us. It was
Right.
2018, and she still goes, sometimes could be about, relationship or whatever, but it's gotten to a point where it's just nice to have somebody else that can help her through all of the things. There's just
Mhm.
things that are different, and she's become more introspective, and she's, still a teacher and doing what she does, but there's also, I think it helps. I remember my parents saying I don't need to go to a therapist because whether they're going to just tell me how I'm supposed to feel. And I'm like, that's not really how it works, but okay. And they both could still use that because they're so busy trying to be strong for each other. If they even hear Elena's name or see a picture, it's very emotional for them. And you can see that that's still been a tough journey for them. Similarly with, like Elena's the murderer, he was a PTSD veteran. A lot of times when veterans get out, they are not given, they say the things they need to say to get out. And then the VA goes, okay, rubber stamps them and says, you're gone or you're done with the system.
Right.
And then PTSD pops up. So you have to then get them back in to be able to get them the services they need. And it takes quite a bit of effort. And for my journey was, I think I went to the therapist 5 or 6 times. Because we went through something that's referred to as post-traumatic growth. We didn't really go through the stages of grief that, I needed to meet with this guy and say like, am I going to all of a sudden be in denial or angry or, you know what I mean? Or bargaining 6 months from now and starting this process over. And he's like, no, once you're at acceptance in sorrow, like it's not like we just skipped it and everybody was happy, right?
Right.
It's just the facts that the denial and the anger weren't there. That he's like, once you've gone through and you've processed it, then you're not going to go back through it in that way. There are things that can trigger to make you think about it, obviously,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But to hear that in terms of the therapy side's really good advice from you because a lot of people, especially, the older generation, our parents' generation, they think like, oh, well, if you're going to a therapist, you must be crazy. It's like, that's not really the
Mhm.
scenario. And so it's good to hear. And yeah, Hannah, my dad always will say this, say quite a bit. He's like, is she still going to therapy? As if like there's a time where you shouldn't
Yeah.
go anymore. And it's like, some people will go for the rest of their lives.
Mhm.
And ironically, we talk about like we talked about earlier, signs. Our good friend met with Hannah and I for the first time. And he said, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm your friend. I can't be your therapist, but let me kind of see where you're at. Let's have a conversation and then I'll give you some recommendations. And the woman that Hannah ended up getting to be her therapist, her name's Elena as well. And so
Oh,
it's been
wow.
such a cool
Oh,
relationship and she's
goosebumps.
been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been a really a good one on the journey with her, and it's been such a big support. And there's just not enough therapists in our country
There
to
isn't.
serve the people that are needing help,
Well,
right?
and insurance doesn't cover it enough either. That was another big factor for me was that, in order for me to keep going to her, it was cash pay for me. My
Yeah.
insurance wasn't gonna take care of it. So, but my youngest has been before the diagnosis of ADHD and through, like, all of the suicide watch and whatnot, he, refused therapy, refused it. I was trying to do therapy with him before Bob passed, knowing what everything looked like, and he was shutting down completely. My youngest was shutting down, and it was terrifying. So, like, this kid's got to talk. He's got to talk somewhere. And even the therapist that I did have him at, he was refusing to speak. And he told me he was going to refuse to speak. But when everything came unraveled with the parents contacting me that Sunday morning and I just broke down and fell apart, he heard me. He came out and I didn't realize I was literally sobbing so loud out loud. He came out and he said, Mom, what's going on? I said, I just got a phone call and I got a text message. What is going on with you? We need to have this talk. And in the midst of that talk, he said, Mom, I've been feeling like this for a long time. He goes, I need medication. I need help. And I said, well, you can't get that without a therapist. There is nothing that will happen unless you go and talk to somebody. Nobody's going to just give you medication. You need to talk. So he said, okay. And it took that
Mm.
breaking point for him to say, okay. And the very next day, just like myself, the very next day I found somebody and he stuck it out with that therapist for a while. And then he felt like he was okay for a period of time. And then my therapist introduced us to a different type of therapy, which is more like life guidance, life coaching type therapy.
Hmm.
And this woman has been a game changer in the sense that while I thought that raising my kiddos one specific way was going to happen, and it didn't, like we talked about, she has been the one that has helped him and guide him to, okay, you have to do XYZ because with the neurodivergent brain, definitely thinks
Hmm.
differently. So, and she's very astute at all of the techniques and how to get them to understand and process and the steps that he has to take. And so we managed to get a driver's license this last year. He's been putting in job applications. He's got his own insurance now, his own healthcare insurance. So it's not coming out of my pocket because as a widow, the women have the hardest time trying to keep themselves afloat. And I can't afford to pay for all of that anymore. Even though I have a great job, it's tough to do it on your own. And
Mm.
our business is no longer viable. That's a whole nother story. I ended up in a litigation suit with one of the guys that worked with my husband. And he basically stole the entire business. The attorney's fees that came from that and the loss that came from that was another layer. There's so much that happens. It could be, a day-to-day thing without loss, but it seems that when you're going through something really difficult, the hits just keep coming. They
Yeah.
keep coming. And
Yeah.
it's like, what doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. Well, it definitely has made me stronger. There's probably a whole book of stuff in there that would make people go, you know what? I think I can do this life if she did. I've had a
Yeah.
tree in a house and like all kinds of stuff. It's
Eh,
been things that I never thought I would have to do in a million years.
Right.
Million years.
And you get through it,
You
right?
do. You do.
If you could give, as we get close to wrapping up, if you could give any advice to somebody that's new on this grief journey, what would that be?
Grace. It's always grace. Always grace. I just recently went to the Long Island Medium, which she came to town and I was sitting in a whole room full of people that had loss and listening to their stories and watching them and some that are so raw and so new to this grief journey. Every time I hear a new grief journey comrade, I guess we can call him, right? Hate to even think that they're on the same path, but it makes me realize how far I've come, right? Watching somebody go through that just raw pain where they don't even know their name at this point. And it's literally grace, like having those moments to just sit and be when you're falling apart and take a minute to let the tears come. I fight them now so hard because I don't feel like feeling crummy the next day. But I do have moments to catch up with me now. It's different now, right? I don't cry every day like I used to, but I do take the moment. Had some really hard dates this last, 6 months, and they all hit fast and furious because unfortunately all happened at the same time. And I literally got hit hard, harder than I thought I would, even 6 years later. Sometimes they're just barely a bump in the road, and other times the body keeps the score, right?
Hmm.
We know that there's something that's just going to take us out for the day, and we just have to feel it to heal it. So that is my best
Yes, so
advice:
true.
is just grace, just sit with it, let it be. Tomorrow's a different day, and you'll feel so much better for it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. And it is true. I mean, it's taken us 5 months to try to schedule this date, like to us to get together, right? Because you
Yeah.
had these times and you said, Eric, I'd like this, a lot of this comes up at the year I need to be
Mhm.
after this time. And my first thought was like, okay, because, a lot of times I squeeze these in when I can get the time to do it. But to hear you say that, it makes a lot of sense, and actually huge kudos to you to give yourself that grace to be like, I know this is going to be a tough moment in it
Mhm.
and I'm going to take it as I need to. It's really good advice for somebody in that, on the grief journey for sure.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to sit here and be a blubbering mess. I knew I would be. I could feel it, and doing the day to day, going to work, working 9 hours, coming home, making dinner with your kiddo, just doing regular life stuff is hard enough. But when it's compounded by, missing somebody desperately, or,
Yeah.
life just feels empty and memories are flooding in. It's hard to have these real conversations, right? Like
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
breaking down, without you kind of go back to that fog. You kind of go back to that safe place that our brains put us in when we are going through that deepest of traumas. But
Right.
so yeah, I needed to give myself that grace between like September and the very beginning of February. It's a long time. It really
Yeah.
is. And even with the holidays, he died 2 weeks after January 16th. So it was 2, 3 weeks after Christmas and the New Year and our anniversary, and all of it just all piles on so quickly. And
Yeah.
holidays, for me, holidays are I think this year I understand that holidays don't have to look like what they used to because we did all the traditional things. And I had to laugh this year because we had best intentions. We got all the decorations up, got the tree up, had one ornament on that tree. I ended up getting sick too. And I was like, "Oh gosh, we gotta get that box of ornaments out." And they're all family ornaments, and it means a lot to put that tree together, right? And I thought, well, there was 2 other Christmases we did no decorations. We didn't find the energy, couldn't find an ounce of Christmas spirit anywhere, and
Hmm.
just went, "It's okay. It's fine. We've got next year. No big deal." This year, there was one ornament on the tree, and I had to laugh. I sat there and I thought, "Okay, so these are gonna be the Christmases I remember," because
Hmm.
it was just how I got through it, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, the decorations were up, but there was no tree decorated. It was just
Yeah.
one ornament on that tree, and I went, "Okay, it's fine. It's fine." That's the grace, right? Like, you have
Right.
to find the
Right.
grace, and the acceptance of it is what it is. It's not gonna look like
Right.
what you thought it was, and I'm still
Right.
trying to figure out what it looks like. I thought that Christmas could still feel the same way. I thought that it could still look the same way. It's not ever going to. It's not ever going
Right.
to. So it has to
Well,
be
and
different.
yeah, and I think I love that point because I think I'd even take it one step further and say, and then it's not only giving yourself the grace, it's also giving the other. So if your son had said, "Mom, I really want to put the rest of these ornaments up," even though you weren't feeling it this year or whatever,
Right, I've done
to
it.
go like, this means a lot to him. Okay, that you know what I mean. And some people, like we have one that they do some very specific things for their lost child. And I'm like, are the others are the other siblings on the same page with that? Or,
Right.
like, because sometimes it's like, it's okay. Like that was a tradition. Does it need to shift again? And that's okay. Like, because you're all in this grief journey. While you're separate, you're also
Yep.
together. And these things can either drive families together or drive them apart. So
Yeah. And we talk
I
about it
just really,
every year. We talk
right.
about what we're going to do every year. And are you up
Yeah.
for it? Do you feel like this?
Yeah. Well, Julie, I really appreciate you taking the time, and give my love to the family. And I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Lessons in Loss, Love, and Resilience.
I'm
Thank you.
happy to be here. Thank you, Eric. It was good to see you and tell everybody hello.
Will do.